wonderful to see all of you here, and we're going to do everything we can to turn Winnebago County blue, right? I know that's a tall order, but we're going to do everything we can. So I just want to share a few thoughts this morning. I want to start with, now that we're finally out of session in the Senate, we've just been out of session a couple of weeks, and I've been home and I've been listening to folks. I think through the perspective of most Wisconsinites, they'd say, Washington's a mess. There are tweet storms. We kind of brace ourselves. What did he tweet in the wee hours? Will it dominate the television cycle for the next day or week? We watch cable news, and there are people just shouting past each other. And there's distractions, there's chaos, there's noise, there's dysfunction. And when Washington isn't working, it means it's not working for Wisconsin. And it's not working for you and your families and your communities. But I want to submit that Washington is working pretty well for some. Take that tax bill that was passed late last year. It was packaged and billed and branded as something for working people in the middle class. Yet 83% of the breaks went to the top 1% in the individual side and big multinational and other corporations on the corporate side. 83% of the breaks. We were told it would pay for itself. It is hard to make a $2 trillion mathematical error. You have to work really hard to do that, or you have to just be not telling the truth. When last week, the budget analysts said that our deficit had shot up by 17% because of lower corporate tax revenues, Mitch McConnell and others who supported that measure said, you know what, we're just going to have to cut back on Social Security and Medicare. Well, that's not what caused this. And Social Security and Medicare, may I remind everyone in this room, are earned benefits. You know, one of the other big lies of this tax measure were that, okay, so maybe your tax break isn't as big as you'd like, but it's going to trickle down. We're going to see people get wage increases. We're going to see employers invest in modern machinery. We're going to see worker training come out of the pockets of employers who so desperately want new employees. Most of their tax breaks went to stock dividend payouts and stock buybacks. Stock buybacks. Now, there's not a uniform lifting of all boats when that's what you put those dollars into. And the point I'm trying to make is that while Washington isn't working for Wisconsin, it's working pretty darn well for a group of people, the wealthy, the powerful, the multinational corporate interests. And you would think it would be enough that they have this army of lobbyists and influence in the Congress, that they'd be somehow satisfied with that. They got their big tax break. But no. Now they're trying to determine the outcomes of elections, including those here in the state of Wisconsin. Now, here in the Fox Valley, you may have noticed that there were a few attack ads against me over the past year and a half.
Just a couple.
I was the top target of the out-of-state super PACs for most of this election cycle. $14 million spent trying to defeat me. I had attack ads on the air before I had an opponent.
Yep.
I kept asking my colleagues in Washington, how do I run against a super PAC? I mean, I really don't know how do you debate? How do you respond? You know, it's difficult. And then I finally just decided, hey, I hope all of you are going to wear this like a badge of honor. Because they're going after me and us. Because I am not afraid to stand up to them. And I will always stand for you.
Thank you.
And so I think about Sarah's story and how we've gone after the big pharmaceuticals with bipartisan legislation, I might add. The Fair Drug Pricing Act I wrote with John McCain. And we are going to fight to pass that because Sarah has that story. And my friend Diane in western Wisconsin who was told that her MS medication would be $90,000 a year. And people who need an EpiPen to save lives doubled in price 2 years ago. And people who need insulin over the last 5 years have seen that double in price. These aren't new discovery drugs. These aren't things that they just invested in. These are things that have been on the market for a long, long time. The drug companies do it because they can. And we can't let them anymore. I think probably the sharpest contrast in this race between me and my opponent does center on healthcare, that deeply, deeply personal issue. And while she has a record in the state legislature of voting with the insurance companies and against the people, like voting against covering oral chemo, and voting against covering mental illness, and voting against covering hearing aids for deaf children, I'm not afraid to stand up to those big insurance companies and fight for health care for everyone, including covering pre-existing conditions. Now, I have to tell you that this is a very, very special moment for me because of a family that's in the audience this morning. So any of you who have heard me give my stump speech before know that I like to contrast the agenda, the greedy agenda of some of these outside super PACs and some of these places that hire armies of lobbyists to try to get their way. And then I like to tell a story about someone I've met along the way. And Jenny and Cass and Larry are here today. And yes, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about them. And you can tell me if I'm embellishing along the way since we first met or whether I got the story down right. And Pearl would be here, I know, if she could, the rest of the nuclear family here. So I met Jenny most recently at an event. It was a campaign event. And I told my own healthcare story about how when I was 9 years old, I had a very serious illness. I was in the hospital for 3 months. My grandparents, after I was labeled as a child with a pre-existing condition, tried to find me insurance and couldn't, because who would want to insure somebody who had just been in the hospital for 3 months, right? And I grew up believing that was wrong and that no family should ever have to struggle with that. And so it was my enormous pride and honor when I was in the House of Representatives to be able to work on the Affordable Care Act and to be able to work to pass that guarantee that people with pre-existing health conditions won't be discriminated against and can get health care. And that young people who are under 26 can stay on their parents' health insurance. And that was a big honor. But we know it's under threat. We know it's under big, big threat. So I told my story at this event, and Jenny came up to me. And she said, that story moved me, and I want to tell you ours. Jenny said that her son, Cass, had been diagnosed with cancer at age 17. And that the doctors had recommended a very intense chemotherapy regimen. And they live here in Oshkosh, but Jenny and Cass basically moved to Children's Hospital in Milwaukee, and Larry came every time he could with Pearl, and they were just rallying by Cass's side. And Cass was just toughing it out, right? And Jenny, said to me, I was in the room on election day, and there was a TV and sort of looking at the results come in November of 16. And that's not supposed to be happening. Self-destruction results, and then all of a sudden, the realization is something like you become an exception. Terrified about what this could mean for cats. Cats, who, like you, or yourself, will always be the first need of pre-existing company. And so if this fight progressed in a way where people with pre-existing conditions could no longer get health care again, that was going to be awful. But also, you have insurance, you and Larry, and you saw it covering these bills and taking care of what needed to be taken care of. You also saw the bills and said, you could never withstood that without insurance. And I understand exactly what you mean when you say that's terrifying. But I want to say, and this gets to sort of one of the big points of this, is it wasn't just bursting into tears and becoming terrified. It was resolving at that moment that we're going to fight, we're going to become politically active. I think you already were, but we're not going to let this one up. Cass has been in remission for 18 months. Okay. I have to realize time passes. 21 months. That's great. And the whole family is involved in this election as one step on turning things around. I want to tell you that I think we have a very good shot at this. And the reason we do is because after that last election, people became engaged. We have a group of first-time canvassers in the back of the room, front of the room, who said, I'm not sitting on the sidelines. I'm going to get involved. There's so many ways you can be involved, but the very first one that we're celebrating today is early vote. Thank you, Jake, for getting Saturday hours in Oshkosh. And so I'm kind of feeling like we need a little bit of levity just to remind us who's on the ballot and what we have to do, because we're going to fight this at every level. Yes. So I was at a parade the other day, and we were just trying to keep the crowd cheering, and this will help us all get Sarah's last name. So I say Gordon, you say Heiss. Gordon. Heiss. Good job. Should we do it a couple times?
Yeah. Let's do it. Okay. When
All
I
right.
say Gordon, you say Hintz. Gordon. Hintz. Gordon. Hintz. When I say Jake, you say Kraus. Jake. Kraus. Jake. Kraus. When I say Dan, you say Cole. Dan. Cole. Dan. Cole. When I say Sarah, you say Godlewski.
Mandela.
You say Barnes. Mandela. Barnes. Mandela. Barnes. When I say Tammy, you say Baldin. Tammy.
When I say Tony, you say Evers. Tony. Evers. Tony. Evers.
Thank you to our current and future U.S. Senator, and I just want to remind everybody why we're here. I think there's a couple things we need to check off the list. We're going to take a picture from here going this way, so we need all of you in it. So we'll do that in 1 second. I'm going to remind you that we're here because if you live in the city of Oshkosh, City Hall is 3 blocks, 2.5 blocks away, and we have early voting for the first time ever on a Saturday between 9 and noon. I understand there are people down there. I'm going to vote. My parents are here. They're going to vote. I hope all of you that haven't voted yet will go down and vote. I also want to give a shout out to vote down ballot for all the Democrats, and my future colleague Joe Lavrens is here. If you live... He's running in the 53rd Assembly District. He represents the north side of Oshkosh, so if you live north of Murdoch, between Grove and Harrison, I always have to remember these things for people that are counting. And then after you're done voting at City Hall, please do sign up. Look at your calendar between now and the election. Kat's over there. Do you have 3 hours? Do you have 6